Yo, yo, yo. This is candibknittin. I'm Candy B. I be knitting. And this week, I was actually out of town for work, and so I wanted to kind of share with y'all my approach to traveling with my knitting. Today's Saturday. I left Monday evening, came back Friday evening, so I just got back last night. And so 5 days, 4 nights, and professional trip. So I didn't actually get as much knitting as I would have wanted to. Like if I was on vacation, I would have brought like some mega projects, but I kept it simple. It was at a training and it was quite intense. And so I really didn't have much brain power to do very much knitting. But my approach is I, I've seen this a lot in other people, so I know y'all can relate. I probably bring way more than what I could possibly ever knit on, possibly, but I also don't want to get caught somewhere off, the beaten path and not have knitting with me. So this first project that I was working on, you'll recognize this bag. This is my hand spun cowl I'm working on, and this is just a really good project because it's just stockinette. And so when I got to the train station, there was about 30 minutes before my train was going to leave, and so I just knit in a circle. I don't have to worry about counting rows or keeping up with a pattern. When my train comes, I can just throw it in the bag and not worry about things getting tangled up or wild. And I still have a little bit of this left. Eventually I'm gonna get to the point where I'm gonna start like measuring it for the bind off, but I just knew that I was pretty far off from that point, so I could just knit as much as I like. And like I said, if I have to like move at a hair's breadth, or something urgent is happening, I can just ball it up, put it in my wrist, and I'm ready to go catch my train. And then once I get on the train, I like to settle in. I downloaded some movies, I have my books, I get really comfortable, and then I can like work on something that is a little bit more needing of my attention, something that has a little bit more stuff going on with it. The last time I took a train for work, I actually took a whole sweater with me, and I was at the point where I needed to do sleeves, and I just did the sleeves on the train while watching a movie, and it worked out pretty well. Because if you are, I feel like this is true for most of America, our trains aren't as effectively utilized as I understand them to be in most other countries. So the train is usually pretty empty. I usually have an empty seat beside me. I can put my bag there if I'm working on a bigger project and kind of spread out a little bit. The issue with that is that the two big projects I was working on, one is my LaPouf cardigan, and I was at the point where I was debating whether or not I was ready to bind off. And the next thing I want to do after the bind off is actually steam the whole thing before picking up for the edging around the collar. And so it really wasn't gonna be really good travel wear because I didn't have much I could do on it on a train. And then the other thing is my Kagan quilt I'm working on, which I wouldn't have minded working on a train, but it also has a lot of individual balls. And my biggest nightmare is I'm gonna kick over my bag and I'm gonna have just balls going all over the place, and I have all the different colors I'm trying to manage and stuff. So that really wasn't a great option. So I ended up just bringing these socks, and the socks worked out well. Oh, by the way, ta-da! I finished Mr. Rulud's Father's Day gift, which that's another reason I brought the socks, because they weren't done. In tomorrow, Sunday in the United States, is Father's Day, and this is my gift, one of my gifts to him. So I knew I wanted to finish these. The other reason that it worked out is, as I just told y'all, usually the train is only about like 25% full. And this was true this time, except for the fact that somehow a couple I bought my ticket months ago as soon as I knew I had to do this training. I intentionally chose a seat where no one else was sitting, and it was a window seat, so I could sit, look out the window, have my bag right here. I got to my seat, and then a couple gets on the train, and the couple has bought seats across the aisle from one another, which is fine. I don't always want to sit next to Mr. Rulud. But in this case, the wife's seat was next to me, and so on this mostly empty train, I had a person sitting right next to me who then wanted to interact with her husband the whole way, as they chose not to buy seats next to one another. And that was interesting. So I really honestly didn't have a lot of space to spread out and have a more complex project. So it was good that I had my socks with me, and I knit them on DPNs. That's another reason I save them for when I'm sitting on the train and I know I have a couple of hours to knit, because it can get a little messy. You don't want your stitches to fall off your DPNs. But I finished these, and these are just my own taking from different patterns that have been working. What's been happening is I've been knitting socks that initially fit, and you all know how negative ease works. You want the socks to be a little bit tighter, but then I get very concerned that they won't fit in the end, and so I've been knitting his socks a little too big, and now I think I've got it down. These are 72 stitch socks on size 0 needles. I just did a 3x1 rib for 36 rows, and then I do 12 rows of stockinette, and then I did an eye of partridge heel just because that's the heel I felt like doing. And then the first sock I knit to the edge of, or the top of his little toe, and then once I get to the second sock, I just make the rows match, and it just so happened that it was exactly 60 rows. And so that's just going to be my golden number to knit to when I'm knitting socks for him. And then I just did a classic, the decreases for the toe, and I decreased the toe down to 16 stitches and then grafted the toe together. And this is the Felici Knit Picks Felici in the colorway Arcade Afternoon, and they are done. He has since worn them, and he likes them, and so I'm going to, forge ahead making his socks with 72 stitches and see how that works for him. See if these get kind of, what's been happening with the 80 stitch socks is that they've been kind of getting stretched out of shape, and he says they still fit and they don't slip, but it's just that feeling of, everyone has their own thing when it comes to socks. Some people don't like it to dig into their legs. Some people don't like it when it's too loose, because then you don't have that sense of like security. You want something that really hugs your foot. And so we're just going to continue to play around with it. The next pair of socks I'm going to make also is going to be with the Knit Picks Felici. So then it's going to be more uniform. But obviously, if I was playing around with different gauges, different types of sock yarn, some sock yarn, not all sock yarn is created equally, and so it's going to be an ever-going thing. But for now, I only owe him 2 more pairs of socks, and so I have another set of Knit Picks yarn for him, and then he has requested a pair of black and white striped socks, like he said Beetlejuice socks, and so I have the yarn for that, and it's a Hobie yarn, and I'll be working on that after the stripes are going to present another set of challenges, and so I really want to get just the vanilla straight sock down packed, and then the grand finale can be these black and white striped socks. But they're done. I was probably on the second sock, I was just about wrapping up the heel decreases, or the gusset decreases rather, and then so while I was there, I knit most of the body of the sock on the train. It was about a 2-hour train ride, and then over the course of the next few nights in my hotel room, when I got back from class, I would work on the toe, and then I wove in all the ends, and that's the bulk of what I did on my trip. The other thing I wanted to note about these is I was telling y'all when I made my Vertices Unite shawl that I felt like my SSKs were really sloppy. And so I was just like, well, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe it was just that pattern, whatever. And so I proceeded to make my socks. And, when you're making socks, you're SSKing, to do the decreases. And on my sock, I ended up with the same laddering issue in my SSKs. And I was just like, ugh, okay, this is a thing. I need to look this up. And so some people had suggested I look up Patty J. Lyons' method for doing SSKs. And so I left the first sock as is. And for the second sock, I did Patty Lyons' method. I won't explain it to you because I know I'm terrible at explaining things that involve directions. And so I'm just going to put a link to her tutorial in the about box or whatever, the description box. But it didn't help. long story short, it's an interesting method. The method is mostly about tightening up the actual stitches in the SSK, but I think I need to actually tighten up the stitch before the SSK is my problem. So it's the latter, not the actual stitches. And so I finished both socks and they really didn't look that different to me. So I was like, I'm not going to rip out the first sock and do it again just because it looks the same. And it also seems to be the SSK on one side. So, when you're decreasing for the end of the sock, you SSK, knit two together, SSK, knit two together. And so it's only one set of the SSKs that are like that. And so I just need to play around with it more, play with tightening the stitches. I'm hoping once those socks get washed, the yarn will fluff up a bit. If not, I'll probably just go in and maybe duplicate stitch and just reinforce it so it's not like got too much tension on it and it's pulling a lot. Bit of a bummer because I was really hoping Patty Lyons, of all people, could save me from myself, but womp womp. But I'll still share the link. For me, so it's a method by which you go through both of the stitches first, and then you pull through. So usually you slip one. This way she like goes in one direction, comes out the direction of another stitch, which, like I said, I was going to describe it terribly. The issue is the method actually put a lot of stress on my hand too. So I'm just like, this would be really kind of tough to do. You're doing all the SSKs on the heel and the gusset of the sock, then you get down to the toe. Like, I just feel like it would be a lot of hand fatigue from that method. So I don't think it's for me for that reason as well. But I'm still going to put it in the description box because it might help one of you, or you find it a little bit simpler. I throw my yarn. I never understand the whole throwing versus picking thing, but I'm pretty sure I'm an English style knitter, and so maybe that's a part of it too. But yeah, I think the ticket is just going to be to reinforce that stitch, or I can always go through. Usually what I do, if I see like loose stitches somewhere, I just take my crochet hook and tighten up the stitch before or after, and that neatens up the project too. But a bit of a bummer. I'm not sure what happened, like what changed in my knitting style that started happening, because I've never had an issue with that before. Like, a lot of people don't like DPNs because of the laddering, where you have, gapping between the needles. But I had that issue like the very first time I knit with DPNs, but very quickly my gauge kind of evened itself out. So I'm really not sure what happened. It's just this new issue that's come up, and I don't know what it is, but we'll continue down the path. The next thing I want to show y'all was my stretch goal. This yarn here is Vesper sock yarn by Knitterly Things. It's superwash wool, 25% nylon, in the colorway Progress. And this is a yarn I ordered last summer in June for Pride Month, and she dyed it up. Like, you had to do a pre-order, and then she dyed it up over the summer. And there was actually, the United States Postal Service actually lost my yarn last year, and so it took me a while to get this. She was incredibly sweet and tried to track it down for me, couldn't track it down for me, sent me a whole new skein, and sent me some little treats in it too. So very appreciative, and so I figured it's time to knit with this yarn. It is June, which is Pride Month for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer community, and everybody else that is under that umbrella. And so I was like, oh, that'd be cute to do a little Pride project. And I knew these socks weren't going to last me the whole trip. I ended up not even getting to this until the ride back. And the project I want to make with these are the Pioneer gloves by BohoKnits. And do I have a picture in here? I don't. I print off my patterns, but then I don't print the pictures just because, to save ink and space and things. But it's a free pattern, and this is what they look like. And you can do them short or long, and it's one of the patterns that I've knit the most in my very illustrious knitting career. And I've actually knit them twice as gifts, and I was just like, I think it's time to have one set for myself. And so the reason that I thought this would be a good thing to take on a trip is because this would be my third time making them, so I know how the pattern goes. It's fairly compact, it's fingering weight yarn, and it's for me, so I can measure it on my hand as I go. The issue is I kind of forgot, because I take terrible notes, how I knit them the first time, and the pattern itself calls for size 2 needles, US size 2 needles, and so I started knitting on them, and I didn't really like the fabric I was getting, and they were coming out too big for me, and so I was just like, I gotta get home and just try some different. I think I'm gonna go down to size 1s, which now that my memory is coming back, I'm like, yes, I think the same thing before, because a lot of patterns, I like the look of a tighter gauge just in general, and a lot of patterns I find tend to be knit at a looser gauge than I prefer, and so I would much rather go down in gauge and go up a size. So I'm gonna try, just because I have become a looser knitter over time, and it's been a year or two since I knit these the first time, but I think I'm going to try to do the medium size. In the past, I've knit the large on smaller needles, but I think I'm going to try a smaller size on smaller needles, because also I want that negative ease of having on a pair of gloves or wrist warmers. They're fingerless gloves, actually. The other thing too is it's June and it's Pride Month. This is these are the colors of the Progress Pride flag. But where I live in Virginia, they acknowledge Pride in June, but the actual big celebration locally is in September. So I also thought it would be neat. Like, I can start this in June because it's actually Pride Month, and then actually wear a pair of fingerless gloves to the actual Pride events we have in September. So it's like they're calling it like a summer of Pride, because it's like bookended by these two big events. I think it's because we live close to like a university town, and so it gives an opportunity for the kids coming back to school to be able to participate. A lot of people aren't here in June, and a lot of people leave town in June, and so I think that's going to be great once I figure out the gauge, find my size 1 needles, and get to it, and then I'll have my little gloves. But it would have been nice had I been able to get more done on these, but like I said, my training was pretty exhausting. I worked mostly on the socks. I got the socks completely done, which was a good thing. And so this was more of like, just in case I ran out of things to do, which I didn't. Y'all know. Have you ever been on a trip and actually ran out of knitting? Let me know in the comments, because I can't imagine. The last thing I want to show y'all was my big reach, like my big stretch goal. I try to also, when I travel, bring stuff that I've been avoiding with me, because then I'm like stuck and there's nothing else I can work on but the thing that's been haunting me. This is not a knitting project that I'm about to show you. This is a sewing project. So this dress, don't get impressed. This dress is bought from Amazon, but it's my daughter's dress, and she wore it. She loves this dress. She wore it to school, got a hole in it. And rather than tell me, hey, there's a hole in my dress, she continued to wear it until she got a giant gash down the dress. And so it was like ripped all the way down to here. I have since cut it the rest of the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew it the whole way down and just kind of fold in the sides on itself and sew. Well, I'm going to turn it inside out, because I at least know that much from from sewing. And then I'm just going to hand sew it back together. So I brought this dress with me thinking that maybe if I really, really was just bored to tears and there was nothing else to do but watch The Real Housewives of Dubai in the hotel room, then this was it. So I brought a needle and thread with me, and I really thought maybe I would get to this. I did not. It will continue to be on my assignment list. But the reason being, one, having kids, they definitely, like, by the time my clothes get holes in them, they're pretty much done. Like, okay, I've had this jacket for 10 years. It's finally falling apart. That's fine. But with kids, it's like, oh, you wore that twice and it's destroyed. I don't know how I feel about that, And so I really do want to try to get a little bit more wear out of their clothes. Also, this is a really kind of safe way to try my hand at hand sewing. I keep saying I'm not a sewer. I keep saying I hate sewing, but I do have in the back of my mind, it'd be nice to be able to like hand sew a little bit. I know like the whole visible mending thing is such a trend right now. It'd be nice to be, you know, it's a good skill set to have. It'd be nice if I could develop that. The reason I don't like to sew is that I lack the patience for sewing. And obviously through knitting, through gardening, I've gained so much from these other activities and hobbies that involve patience, that this would be like the next step in like my journey to be a more patient, quiet, thoughtful person. And so eventually I would like to get to the point where, maybe I hand sew a quilt or something. I don't know. But for now, I will settle for fixing a dress that my daughter has literally loved to death. But this was not the trip to do that. But it will. I have a whole bag of things that need to be tended to or repaired. It's a lot of knitting. I do have a pair of socks that I want to like reinforce. I have a pair of socks, and I think I showed y'all on an episode where I talked about things I wanted to accomplish this year. Now that I have the straps on that top, I kind of want to always have a pocket of a knitting project or a sewing project or some kind of project that involves something I really don't feel like doing. So I got the straps on that shirt last week, or that crop top last week, and now it's like, okay, now work on your mending. Okay, now you need to work on fixing the heel of that sock. Something that's like I've been putting off basically. And if I can find just 15 minutes sometime during the week to work towards those goals, I think it'll help me a lot in the long run. That's all I wanted to show y'all. I hope life is treating you well. Let me know in the comments. Like I said, it is in the northern hemisphere, at least. We're going in the summer. That's a time a lot of people do travel. I have some family vacations I'm planning. There's always nice trips to the beach. It's quite a drive for us to get down to the beach, so I get a lot of knitting time done in the car this time of year. So let me know like your travel style with knitting. Do you oh, let me think. Yeah, let me make sure I bring. Let me wind up some skeins because I'm definitely gonna cast on that sweater. Are you that person? Or are you just like, I'll just bring my socks, and if I run out of time, it's fine. Luckily, I also am a reader, so I bought a couple of books with me, so I did get a little bit of reading done when I found out that my mitts weren't gonna work for me. Let me know. Once again, I'm Candi B. I be knittin'. You can email me candibknittin@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on Instagram at Rulude. I'm also at Rulude, or just Rulude on Ko-fi. I think that's all the places you can find me. Or maybe you saw me in that training this weekend. You want to talk to me on a professional level. That's the other thing too. I was like, oh, maybe I'll be able to get some knitting in between these classes I'm taking. That didn't happen. It was quite an intense week. I like I said, I barely had enough energy to go back to the hotel and knit a few rows and close up a sock. So, them's the breaks. But until the next time, peace.